Hello, I'm Pastor Horace Douty, and every Thursday I bring you a local history lesson by way of YouTube. And I encourage you, if you like these programs, then I urge you to click on like and click on subscribe, and then click on the little bell icon so that you'll be advised when the programs are up. And also share these videos with your family and your friends. I appreciate that. Today, the title of the history lesson is Complicated Love, Oxford's Early Pastors. And I have to wonder, did other churches have the same problem as Oxford? Her first pastors were not lucky in love. Those men were highly trained. They were admired as political and intellectual leaders. One would assume that the unmarried Presbyterian parson could write his own ticket in the matter of choosing a life mate, especially here in these back parts of Virginia. But that was not always the case with Oxford Presbyterian Church. William Graham was probably the most intellectually gifted person who ever lived in this part of the world. Almost single-handedly, Graham conceived and founded the school now known as Washington and Lee University. He was a powerful speaker. As far as I can determine, he never lost a debate. When Graham was pastor at Oxford, he was married to Mary Carr, a girl from his home state of Pennsylvania. But she was not his first choice. Years earlier, he had fallen in love with Elizabeth Brown, the daughter of John Brown, first pastor of Timberridge Church. She eventually rejected him, primarily because her mother despised Graham intensely. Now that 2 centuries have passed, I would like to ask Mary Brown. William Graham's name is writ in large letters across the face of Washington and Lee University. His impact, his influence are recognized all over America's intellectual climate. Has your opinion of him changed? Elizabeth must have been a remarkably attractive young woman. The next man to fall desperately in love with her was Oxford's new pastor, Samuel Mccorkle. From the historic journal of Philip Fithian, we now know that young Mccorkle had high hopes of claiming Elizabeth as his bride, and his ardent efforts resulted in nothing more than total failure and heartbreak. In despair, our early pastor left Oxford for North Carolina, where he married Margaret Steele. They had 10 children. Mccorkle set up an academy where young students could prepare for college. And when North Carolina State University at Chapel Hill celebrated its first graduating class of 7 scholars, 6 of them had come from Mccorkle's academy. Heartache had apparently made him strong. Who did the beautiful Elizabeth finally choose to marry? Not a preacher, quite, but the son of a preacher, Reverend Alexander Craighead. The boy's name was Thomas. This boy and Elizabeth apparently had a good life, but they passed out of history. Hopefully they were happy, and surely she had nights when she remembered how she had so disrupted the passion of 2 Oxford preachers. The next of the early pastors to be disappointed in love was Daniel Blaine. He fell in love with a pretty little redhead named Mary Moore, famous for her survival through incredibly cruel Indian captivity. By 1798, Mary had grown up. Her uncle had taken her in upon her return from Ohio, and he lived near Natural Bridge. But Mary had other relatives at Timberridge and visited them often. Mary responded to Daniel Blaine's energetic style, and she agreed to be his wife. Remember, he is now the pastor of Oxford. A wedding was planned. It would take place at Falling Spring Meeting House, which, along with Oxford, fell under the young theologian's charge. Somehow, things went wrong. His fiancée abruptly married another minister, the Reverend Samuel Brown, who was nearly a decade older than either Mary or Daniel. We're told that a woman has the right to change her mind, and Mary exercised that right, and Sam and Mary moved over to New Providence and built a lovely home standing to this day. And Sam served as pastor of the church for the remainder of his life. It was a happy marriage. The couple produced at least 12 Presbyterian pastors in 2 generations. When Samuel died, his son-in-law took over the pulpit in New Providence Church. Daniel Blaine did not move away. Within 7 months, he was wed to Polly Hannah of Lexington, to the relief of the Oxford Church. They had suffered with their young pastor in his humiliation, in his heartbreak, and his embarrassment. And now the jokes and stickers and gossip would end. For 14 years, Blaine filled the pulpits of Oxford and Timber Ridge. He and Polly lived in Lexington, midway between the 2 churches. He was a remarkably industrious clergyman, caring for 2 churches, plus holding a position of full professor at the college, which was then called Liberty Hall. In addition, he and some partners produced and published the 64-page Virginia Religious Magazine every month. Under Blaine's leadership, Oxford built its first real church, the stone chapel that stood on the spot where the congregation meets today. The church interior looked different then. Pews were big wooden boxes with doors closed during worship. The people could not see each other, but they could see the preacher high up near the ceiling under a sounding board. It seems to have been a good time for the church and the pastor, but the workload must have taken a toll because Blaine died in 1814 at the age of 41, the only pastor ever to die in Oxford service. He left Polly with 6 small children, and 50 years later, one of his grandsons became pastor of the Collierstown Presbyterian Church near Oxford. Could Oxford properly be named Heartbreak Hill? Well, it could. Those dedicated young preachers did not enjoy much success with Timber Ridge girls. However, nearly 2 centuries later, Charles Bolivar Leach, whom we call Charlie Boy, went from Oxford over to Timber Ridge and won the heart of Mary Mackey Williams, whose ancestors were the first settlers. I find it satisfying to believe their marriage helped settle some scores and heal some scars.